Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha. Welcome to the show and welcome to Friday. It's our Friday Srimad Bhagavatam class, and we've been like crawling. Me and Kaustubha have been crawling through this section of the Bhagavatam because it is a scientific approach through an ancient paradigm. Just like there's science, right? There's like material, right? Come on.
Sounds like a very sophisticated analysis.
It is very sophisticated. Well, I'm just saying, to study science, to study, chemistry, it takes a special mind. There's a whole paradigm of how we're going to see the world. And we tend to think that in the old days, they weren't thinking like this. They were just running around, whacking each other on the head with bones, wearing pelts. But it's wrong. These ancient cultures, especially India, they had a whole a concept of chemistry, of breaking down the elements, etc. And me and Kaustubha were just stumbling through it a little. So we brought the spiritual scientists.
Okay.
Chaitanya Charan is our special guest. Welcome, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the opportunity. I'm happy to be of service. Your podcast has become the stuff of legends for our movement now.
You're very kind.
Too kind.
He's very kind. We love hearing you speak. I love your voice. I could just sit and listen to you all day long, my friend.
I would like to listen to you, Prabhu. How you do all that you do. It's remarkable.
Very sweet.
Before we get into the Bhagavatam, we got to welcome back Mara.
Mara has been gone for 2 days. If you want to know the honest truth, I had posters up all over town. We really didn't know where she was.
Where was she?
Have you seen this woman? And I was approaching all the milk companies to try to get it on the milk cartons. But anyway.
But she's back.
She showed up again.
What were you doing, Mara? Like, why couldn't you be with us? I'm wondering.
I missed you all. Yeah, I was.
That's not what we asked. That's not what we asked.
Yeah, that was what we asked.
Where were you?
I was staying at Bobby's house taking care of Frankie.
Little Frankie.
Well, Bobby went. Yeah, little Frankie. And she's only 4, so she can't really entertain herself for an hour while I do the show. Although Raghu is very entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, we got other 4-year-olds here.
Yeah, we got other 4-year-olds on the show. It sounds like, Mary, you're making an excuse.
I think Mary just wanted like some time.
Need some breathing room. This every day.
I missed you guys all.
Oh, okay.
We missed
Welcome
you
back.
too.
Welcome back.
Well, we were slugging it out through the material elements and the pradhana and the batter and the
the batter.
Slugging it out. We came to our wits' end and just said, we need a spiritual scientist. Hey, we know a spiritual scientist.
That's right.
And there comes Chaitanya Charan. But do we have any announcements, Mary, before we move on and get to the show?
We do. We have Bhakti Recovery Group meetings today at 1 o'clock and 7:30 p.m. And then we're also going to do a Sweet Baby Krishna tonight, right?
Sweet Baby Krishna tonight.
And that's at what time?
7:30.
7:30 Eastern time.
Yep.
And maybe Raghu just throw out something about the Kali Columbia thing, just quickly.
Kali Columbia is definitively happening, and it's filling up. Some people signed up, but you got to sign up and leave a deposit, or because people tend to be like, I changed my mind. So we're only accepting signups if you leave a deposit. So you can go to raghunath.yoga, and there you can just click on the Kali Columbia link, and there's an email address there, which I'll tell you right now, which is bhaktiretreats108@gmail.com.
Okay.
And this is for our retreat in Kali, which is, what's the date of that? It's the January 13th to the 21st. January 13th, 21st. And break away. If you're sitting on the fence, just jump off the fence, people. This is ridiculous. Just jump off your fence right now and just let's all hang out together in January for a week. Kaustubha's going to be there. I'm just going to go because Kaustubha and Mara are going to be there. Yeah. But then I'm going to get there and find out all the perks of all the Zoomers and others I don't know. We should get the spiritual scientist one of these days on one of our things.
Well, next time we go to the Eco Village, that's where he lives.
You live at the Eco Village, Chaitanya Charan?
Well, during the pandemic, this has been my base. The devotees have been very kind here, so quite likely this may become my base in India when I'm not traveling.
That's great. How nice.
It's a beautiful place.
Okay,
shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's dive right into it.
Why don't you chant our mantras, Raghu?
Okay. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tito jayam mudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan. Unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta parayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart will become extinguished, and loving service to the transcendental Lord, who is praised, the transcendental songs will be established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurunmidatam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born blind in the darkness of ignorance, and my teachers are opening my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances at their lotus feet. All right, we are in it.
All right.
We are in it to win it.
Okay. So why don't I get this started, Raghu? That's all right?
Please, Prabhu, please.
So Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, we've been reading the 26th chapter of the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is, we've been reading so many chapters and they're building up to this, and this is where Kapila Dev, who is Lord Vishnu himself, is speaking to his mother. She's putting forward questions, and he's beginning to explain everything. And it's the first chapter of quite a few chapters here of the conversation between these two. And, it opened it up, and we were following along, well enough. There was a description of these three factors of jnana, the description of there's God, there's the material energy, and then there's the souls. And these three topics were being discussed and the relationship between them. And there's some just really fantastic and very useful verses for us, very practical verses, helping us understand our own place in the world, helping us understand that in one sense, everything that we do in the world and that we identify with, whether it's our accomplishment or our possession or whatever it may be, that actually all that's carried out by the prakriti, all that's being carried out by the material energy. And in one sense, we're doing nothing, whereas still in another sense, we're responsible for whatever we do because we're making choices, we have desires, and everything's being carried out according to that, but only when it has the sanction of the Supreme Lord. So like this relationship was being described at the beginning of the chapter, and we're following along, and it made sense. And then in text 9, Devahuti turns to Kapil Dev, and she says, could you please explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies? And she says, which are, for both of these are the cause of the manifest and unmanifest creation. And now it starts to go into this description of creation. And now new terminology starts to come up, like there's the word pradhana. And we've been explaining the pradhan as almost like a batter, like it's the material ingredients before they've manifest into certain shapes. Is that, or are we on the right track there, would you say, with the definition of pradhan?
Yes, bro, definitely. But the idea is that there is a fundamental principle to the Vedic cosmology, the Bhagavatam's cosmology, that is that even matter is eternal.
Mm-hmm.
That
Matter is eternal.
God, so at one level, the ultimate divinity, God, Krishna, there are two ways of understanding that he is the transcendental, all-loving person
Yes.
towards whom we are trying to develop bhakti. But that is also there is also a more expansive or inclusive understanding that God includes all of existence. So just as God is eternal, we all souls who are parts of God are also eternal.
Mm-hmm.
And the material world and the elements that make up the material world, they are also eternal.
Okay.
But then the question comes up: if the material elements are eternal, material world is eternal, then we always say this is temporary and we should redirect ourselves to the eternal. So what's going on? So then this is where the philosophy of Sankhya comes in, that actually what we are attracted to is temporary. We are not attracted to matter per se. We are attracted to the manifestations of matter.
Okay. So
We
the
are attracted
energy
to the
is eternal,
forms,
but it's
the
taking on new
forms, the
forms all the time.
fragrance, all those. They are not eternal.
Right.
They are not eternal. So what is temporary is the manifestations of matter. So when matter is unmanifested, that means, like in the Bible, it says from dust to dust, from ashes to ashes.
Mm-hmm.
So that is at one level true. That they talking about how the human journey goes from birth to death. But another level, the point is that when matter is in this unformed state, when nothing is manifested from it, so at that time there is nothing to be attracted to in the world. So pradhana is like matter in the unformed state.
Okay.
So it is almost like matter without any of the properties that attract us toward matter.
Okay, that helps a lot.
In terms of the cosmic sequence, the point is that even matter doesn't gain its attractiveness unless there is some divinity acting through it.
Mm-hmm.
And unless there is divine activation, even matter doesn't become attractive. What to speak of the Supreme?
Okay.
So that unmanifested, unformed, the word unattractive has a negative connotation, but that which lacks any attractive potency,
Okay.
that form is pradhan. So you could say that there is a complete raw material of material existence.
Right. Okay. So now the raw material, then Kapil Dev will go on to describe, he's going to break it down into 24 different elements, right?
Yes.
Which are the senses and the sense objects and the senses of action, as well as the senses of acquiring knowledge, the mind, the intelligence, the ego, etc. And then he goes on to add time as the 25th element, right? So how do we understand time in relation to all of these material ingredients?
Okay. So time is, in one sense, a part of the material world, but in another sense, it is actually, you could say, something almost beyond matter. Time is what is this transformation of matter.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you consider in modern physics, time is a very big puzzle. Now, Einstein tried to have this composite called space-time. It says space has 3 dimensions: length, breadth, width, and then he added time to it, and he made it a space-time. But then it's not, even physicists know that time is not like other dimensions. In space, if there's an object along the length, breadth, height, I can go back, I can go forward. But in time, I can only go forward. I cannot go back.
Mm-hmm.
So that means time is a different dimension. So what the Bhagavatam says is that these 24 elements are, we could say, in some ways, the further developed raw material. But the main transformative agent is time.
Okay.
The main transformative agent. So in that sense, it is within matter, but at the same time, it's also somewhat outside matter.
Right.
It's like if you are cooking food, we get all the ingredients. Then after you get the ingredients, you need heat.
Yes.
Without heat, the cooking ingredients won't transform. So similarly, time is the transformer.
Okay.
So that's why there is this paradox. Sorry to come there.
No.
In our tradition, we use the word eternal time. So what is eternal time? So time itself, in one sense, we are all conscious of time, and yet we are not conscious of time. We are all conscious of what is the time. oh, we are running out of time now. But what we are conscious of is actually the measurement of time.
Mm-hmm.
But does time exist independent of its measurement? We very often ask the question, what is the time? But we very rarely ask the question, what is time?
Right.
So, what is time in itself?
Yeah.
It's actually a great mystery. So time, we could say, is the transformative agent.
Okay.
And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna defines it as I am the destroyer. Kalosmi lokakshekut pravaddo. That I am the destroyer. But time is not the destroyer. It actually brings about transformation, which involves creation, maintenance, and destruction. All three things.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, time is outside this 24, but it's not entirely transcendent. So
because it does not exist within
time,
the spiritual realm.
Yeah, it's eternal time means that time as a concept, we can't even actually conceive of that concept. But time as a concept is unchanging, is eternal. But time as measured is constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
And time is causing the changes. So in that sense, it is outside the 24 elements, but it's not completely spiritual. Krishna is considered to be completely spiritual. Time is often considered to be a manifestation of divinity in this world.
And that's what Kapil Dev really clearly points out, right? And he'll say in text 18, by exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all the different elements, keeping himself within as the super soul and without as time. So it seems there that he's saying time is the potency of God. And not only that, but it's also like a potency that we're meant to learn from, right? Like he's inside as the super soul. We're meant to hear that voice. And we're also meant to be educated or enlightened through observing the influence of time on the material energy.
Yes, exactly. So time, in one sense, the main lesson it teaches us is the temporariness of external things, the temporariness of material things. Okay. So by that, we start slowly redirecting our attention toward the eternal. So time exposes the temporariness of material things, and that's how it prompts us. Is there something beyond this temporariness?
Okay.
So that's how it is like a guru.
Now, the next verse that follows that is where things start to get, let's say, less clear for us as we're moving forward. More terminology is going to come in, and a development of the 24 elements that have already been mentioned. Now there's going to be a description of one after the other, how they manifest in the world, I guess you could say, how they manifest or the special way in which they develop. And it seems like at that point, for us at this point, it's become the language as well as what's being indicated is unclear, exactly what's being said. And so let me just read a verse or two to get you started. And really what we'd like you to do is help us understand like the whole rest of the chapter and where it's going and its significance and its importance and how to make sense of it. Is that okay?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. So in text 19, it says, after the Supreme Personality of God, it impregnates material nature with his internal potency. Material nature delivers the sum total of cosmic intelligence. Now, we discussed the idea of him impregnating the material energy with the souls, with the jivas, right? That it's material, and then within that come all of the conscious living beings. But this idea is then it delivers the sum total of cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. And then text 20 says, thus manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent mahat-tattva, which contains all the universe within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. So now we're getting a little lost here. First of all, my first question is, what is mahat-tattva, and how does it differ from pradhana? But just more in general, could you describe what's happening here?
Okay. So before we get into technicalities, I'd like to focus on one fundamental principle. Mm-hmm. See, the Bhagavatam is spoken to a particular audience. And it is spoken to a particular audience It is to Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. So he, in his times, has particular conceptions, and those conceptions are actually there within his mind. So like, with the way Raghunath Prabhu was greeting all of you,
Mhm.
I could probably understand 50-60% of what he was saying along with the greeting.
Okay.
There is certain level of cultural familiarity which he has with all
Yes.
of which I don't.
For those for those that are just going to hear this podcast and weren't here live with us this morning, every morning before we start broadcasting, Raghunath, we play a little music and Raghunath welcomes all the people, 100
Every
or so
guest
people,
personally.
every guest. Yeah. And he's throwing out all kinds of cultural lingo and so on. So for Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, who's from India and is not familiar with these people or why Raghunath is saying what he's saying, it's like it's almost a foreign language.
By the way, if you ever want to, if you're listening out there and you ever want to join us live at Zoom, you can. You just got to write to wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, and Mara will send you the secret codes so you can enter into our morning party.
There you
We
go.
do it every morning, and you can join us live on Zoom. Everybody will admit is much funner.
It is fun.
It is fun.
Okay, please continue, Prabhu.
So there is a cultural context to even timeless or transcendental teachings.
Okay.
So that cultural context is natural because while the speaker is speaking eternal principles, the speaker is also speaking to a particular audience.
Mhm.
So now, in some ways, for Arjun, for Kapila Dev and Devahuti, the discussion is going on. What is happening is that they already know about this particular way of looking at the world called Sankhya.
Mhm.
And now this is a way of looking at the world, but is this way of looking at the world also a way for understanding the source of the world, understanding the Lord? That is the thrust of this discussion. So for example, if somebody, time travel is mostly a concept of fantasy, but say suppose somebody from 200, 300 years ago gets time travels here, and they start hearing a talk, and then they say that, okay, we're talking about smartphones, and we're talking about Zoom, and we're talking about internet, and we're talking about so many things. What are you guys talking about?
Right.
And then, so now these are already things familiar to us, and sometimes we may use a metaphor, just as we want to have good connectivity so that we stay digitally connected, we also need to be spiritually connected. So now that's a metaphor we are using.
Mhm.
Now, everybody who understands digital connection, they understand what is being said. But for somebody who doesn't know the metaphor, say, what is this digital connection all about? So the thing is, why am I talking about all this is that in one sense, the audience of the Bhagavatam to whom this is spoken, Kapil Dev and Devahuti, and in the bigger conversation, Sukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj, they already are familiar with Sankhya. And
Okay.
Sankhya, how that frame of analysis can point us toward Krishna. That is what is described in the Bhagavatam.
So Sankhya philosophy
Sankhya.
is a way of looking at the world which can help us ultimately focus on God, you're saying.
Yes. So Sankhya was at that time a prevailing. Primarily, it's a way of looking at the world.
Mhm.
Sankhya is understood in different ways, just like science today. We could say science is a way of analyzing the world, understanding the world, interacting with the world. Now, through science, can we also perceive God? Yes, it's possible. There are many scientists, at least the initial founding scientists of science, they were all founding scientists of modern science. They were all quite theistic. Newton famously said that, oh Father, I think thy thoughts before thee. So even today, quite a few scientists, not all, not even a majority, but a significant number of scientists are theistically or spiritually minded.
Mhm.
So what is happening is science may not be seen, or science may not be seen in such a way that it can appreciate people's vision of God. But it is possible to see it in that way. So science is known to everyone. For me personally, I studied engineering, I loved science. And I read so many scientific, before I was introduced to Bhakti, I read so many books on science, and even I read biographies of scientists But that many of the biographers, many of these scientists were theistic, were spiritually minded. That was almost conveniently neglected in most of these biographies. It's only when they're devotee scientists whose books I read and they said, oh, okay, science had so many spiritual connections. So they revealed it to me.
Right.
So just as science is a way of looking at the world, but through this way of looking at the world, how can we look at God? That is something which, say, devotee scientists revealed to me. So, and the devotee scientists today can also reveal to us. So similarly, Sankhya is a way of looking at the world that was familiar to the audience at that time.
Right.
But how is this way of looking of the world also connected with God? So Sankhya is primarily about analyzing the world. What the Bhagavatam describes specially. So just to elaborate this, that Sankhya is itself one system of philosophy. One of my friends is doing PhD in Sankhya. He said that since almost like we have books going down to the 5th century BC and before that. So he says there is a department in his university. There are almost like 7,000 books on Sankhya philosophy alone.
Wow.
So Sankhya is a very well-developed system of philosophy. And significantly, he said, most of these books don't really talk much about Ishvara. So they
don't talk about God.
They don't talk about Ishvara, about God, yeah.
Are they the people who are the people that study Sankhya? Is there like ashram, just like we study Bhakti in our ashram? Are there ashrams of Sankhya where they're okay? Let's get into this and rip everything apart and dissect it and tease it out, and you know what I mean? Or is it just for like mathematical minds?
See, Sankhya was always more of a intellectual system, not a sadhana system. So Sankhya was coupled with yoga. Sankhya was coupled with Advaita. Sankhya was coupled with even Bhakti, depending on people. Sankhya is even coupled by some. There have been atheistic traditions even also in India. Sankhya was also used by them. So Sankhya is basically like a tool. It's a way of looking at the world. So currently, when I'm talking about these thousands of books, it's more of an intellectual pursuit. And then different schools of thought may use the Sankhya frame of analysis for their purposes. So Sankhya is a system of analyzing the world. Now, what the Bhagavatam does is that it shows, you are analyzing this world, but within that analysis of the world, we can expand it to look at where the world is coming from and where the world is meant to take us. So that these two things primarily, where not just what the world is made of, but where the world is coming from and where the world is meant to take us. These two things are the distinctive addition to Sankhya of the Bhagavatam.
Okay. Interesting. Let me just reframe, because for a lot of our listeners, even this term Sankhya may escape them a bit.
Yeah.
So
just equate Sankhya in your mind with science. Like an ancient Indian form of science. If the term comes, go ahead.
But to be even more specific, there's a system within it where it breaks down the material world into 24 different elements, and we can analyze them, and in a sense, by observing them separately, understand that we exist beyond them, that we are not made of material ingredients, that we are something else. We are ultimately spirit. Now, what you're mentioning right now, and so here's a question. You're saying Bhagavatam, and my question to you is, do others more modern texts, although they may not be modern, they may be centuries old, but texts on Sankhya that come in the wake of Bhagavatam, do they also describe what we're seeing here in this chapter, which is not only an analysis of the ingredients, but an analysis of how the universe was created, how these elements took shape in the universe, and how they were moved and shifted and so on? Is that a common part of Sankhya studies, or is that only here in Bhagavatam?
See, what happens is that what is called as the Bhagavad Sankhya. When some of our devotees are doing research in Bhagavad Sankhya, and devotee scientists basically. So Bhagavad Sankhya was not a very widely developed system because the tradition, the Bhagavatam tradition focused primarily on Krishna Leela and the other sections of the Bhagavatam which are directly Krishna narration.
Right.
And Sankhya focused on its own analysis of the material world.
Okay.
So Bhagavad Sankhya also, quite a lot has been talked about it, about it in the Bhagavatam commentaries. But even the Bhagavatam Acharyas, they were more interested in the 10th canto and the 7th canto of the Prahlad pastimes. They didn't specifically write commentaries on the 3rd canto with the Sankhya analysis. So in that sense, Bhagavad Sankhya is a field which has a lot of potential for development. And that's what Srila Prabhupada says in one of the purports. We'll come to the 26th verse purport. So just to take your point, so now if you put Kala, because time is also like a transcendental element somewhat. So people say that so in broadly Indian history, if you study Sankhya, they say there are 3 variants of Sankhya: 24 Sankhya, 25 Sankhya, and 26 Sankhya. So
It's
24
3 different
Sankhya
ways to break things down.
Yeah, so there are 24 elements, and then beyond that, yes, there is Prakriti, there is all the material elements, and there is Purusha, there's a conscious being. But then in this 24 Sankhya, the idea is that this conscious being, as long as the conscious being is obsessed with matter, this conscious being gets consumed, gets attached, suffers. And then what is the solution? The solution is moksha. And moksha
Liberation.
in this school, now this is not a very influential school of thought, but to some extent, even Buddhists adopted Sankhya terminology. And their idea is that their idea of nirvana, at least some sects of Buddhism, not all, their idea is dissolution of the self. So in that
I'm
sense,
sorry, it's what of the self?
Dissolving the self.
Okay, so let's just slow down for some of our listeners. So you mentioned that there's 24 material elements. Separate from that, there's us, the soul, that the purusha, the conscious being. But that conscious being becomes entangled through its association with the material energy. All kind of desires are within us, and it's keeping us in a cycle of happiness and distress, being influenced by these material elements. So then comes the question of, you said moksha, or liberation. And then, or in Buddhism, a similar concept is nirvana, freedom from that. But Buddhists commonly see that as the dissolution of the purusha, that the self dissolves. Okay, exactly. Please continue.
So it's like, say, if say somebody's watching a movie and they think it's going to be a romantic comedy, and it turns out to be a ghastly horror movie.
Oh, Raghunath just picked up. So yeah, go ahead.
And then they say, it's terrible, I don't want to watch it. But it's almost like some force is keeping them. Watch it. It's not letting them go.
Right.
So you could say the movie being watched either on the screen, that is like Prakriti playing out. And the spectator is like Purusha. We are conscious beings.
Okay.
So we are watching, we are hoping we'll find pleasure, but then what starts off as promising pleasure often ends up giving trouble.
Right.
So when we start realizing this, I want to get out of this. So if I stop this movie or I turn myself away from this movie, then what next? So one understanding is that liberation means, or the nirvana, that is also an offshoot of Vedic thought. And like some people say Buddhism is like the rebel child of Hinduism.
Okay.
So they took this, they also have this analysis of 24 elements, but they say that when you get ultimately liberated, then there is no self left. Now, not all Buddhists say this, and most Buddhists actually don't know about this ultimate aspect of Buddhism. For them,
it's
mindfulness,
so subtle. It's hard to describe. Yeah.
And all that is what is talked about. They're interested in Buddhism. But that is 24 Buddhists, 24 Sankhya.
Okay.
Now 25 Sankhya is, they say that the perfection of the soul of us conscious beings is just stop watching the movie. When you stop watching the movie, then we will realize we are all one. And to join in the oneness of being, that is perfection. Now, sometimes this is oversimplified and says we all become God. It's not exactly that. Because their idea is, even the idea of God is an illusion. So,
in other words, thinking of a personal form of God, they see that as an illusion, that any form, any concept of form is illusion.
Yes. So see how it is like, if I can depict it. Say there is a person who is observer, say I am looking at you and you are looking at me. So if I am looking at you, I am the subject of consciousness. You are my object of consciousness. I am looking at you. So in the 25 Sankhya, the conception is that both the subject and the object are illusion. So the subject looking at you is illusion. The thing I am looking at you is also an illusion. So when both are removed, what remains is just the stream of consciousness.
You know what I find? I apologize.
Yes,
continue. I just want to ask a question afterwards.
So the stream of consciousness that remains, that they call is the 25th element. So this is, you could say, the monist, Advaitic, Mayavadi understanding of Sankhya.
Okay. So we've gone from Buddhist idea of Sankhya now to an Advaitin view of Sankhya.
Advaitic idea.
24 was the Buddhist, 25 would be the
Advaitic.
The Advaitic, and I assume 26 is going to be the Bhakti Sankhya that you were speaking of.
Yes, the Bhagavad Sankhya or the Bhakti Sankhya.
But Raghunath had a question.
So the idea is, yes. So the Bhagavad Sankhya is that yes, we turn off this movie, and we turn away from this movie. We find that the all-attractive Lord is always next to us, has been with us all the time, and we turn to Him, and the same love and reciprocation that we're looking for in the movie, in the Prakriti, in the material world, we find that in the Lord.
Okay.
So that is 26 Sankhya.
Gotcha.
So that is what the Bhagavatam is teaching. So most Sankhya that is taught in mainstream academia and other places is either 24 or 25. This 26 Sankhya is not taught much.
Although it's the original Sankhya.
Yeah. Now, it depends on how you conceive the word original.
Okay.
Because, historically, we don't have really evidence that this was the first Sankhya. But conceptually, yes, Krishna is, there is the ultimate reality, the source of everything. And then depending on how narrow is your vision, we leave out a 26th element or we leave out a 25th element. So that's the Sankhya's come.
Okay.
So I would say it is the most inclusive Sankhya. It is the most complete Sankhya. So yes, it could be called original in the sense that it was the primeval understanding.
Or could you say because it originated with Kapila Dev, who taught it in that way?
Yes. Now, so I can see comments. I'm confused, and I'm sorry to be confusing you. But
Laura Marco wrote, "I'm confused."
Okay, so maybe I could just summarize this quickly, very briefly, one more time, and then we can go and look at what carries out in this chapter.
Or answer Raghunath's question.
Okay, well, what's Raghunath's question? Raghunath is Prabhu. This is
very
sometimes
polite.
sometimes we call this squirrel.
Sometimes we call it squirrel. I don't know if
Raghunath takes us in a completely different direction.
Well, I would like to zoom out a little because it's interesting. I don't know if you've seen this, Chaitanya Charan, but Kaustubha, you probably have seen it. If you go to like a tourist shop in New York City, they have these maps that say a New Yorker's view of the world, and it has like New York City.
But that was
skyline,
the cover of the New Yorker magazine once that had that.
Oh, that's what made it famous. Okay,
yeah.
And then the rest of the world is like empty. It's like a desert, and then there's London over there.
In other words,
over there.
It's like you're standing in New York City, and it's showing like 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, 11th Avenue. Each one is like, that's half of the picture that you're looking at. And then it's like New Jersey, California, Japan.
The rest of the world is like nothing. It's all about New York. And then they started copying that and making like the LA view of the world, the London view of the world. Whereas and my point is people see things from their vantage point. And at one time, India, which was probably the hub of education, learning, universities, they had a sophisticated view of reality that included spirit. And this is not just for the study of material nature. It's for medicines. It's for healing arts. It's for meditation. It's for dance. And it all leads you somewhere. It all leads you to this Krishna prema, mukti, oneness, bhakti, etc. What happened? How did everything get flipped on its back? And now we have this whole new paradigm, which is almost like the Western view of reality. And this is it, people. There's not even a discussion. This is the way it goes. How did everything get flipped like this? And why do we still play into it? Why don't we just say, well, this is your idea of science? Like I heard a very big Ayurvedic school from America they're trying to get like endorsed or accepted by Harvard. Why do we need Harvard to accept Ayurveda so we get some credibility? we've got our own credibility. We've got hundreds of thousands of years and case studies, etc. This might be a squirrel. Yes, it might be.
That's like a massive squirrel. It's like the biggest squirrel I've ever seen.
Black squirrel.
Like...
It's a big, furry, dark, unique squirrel.
That's like a bear.
It's a bear. It's a. But it's interesting. You know what I mean?
You want to basically you want a history of human existence with that question.
History of human existence. Well, I'll differentiate between, say, correlation and validation. We can make correlations to make the unfamiliar familiar. So, you can make correlation, like I made correlation between Sankhya and science. So, it is one way of looking at things. So now, we are not saying that necessarily modern science is better and Sankhya is lesser, or that modern science, Sankhya has to be proven through the way of modern science. But this is similar. Some similarities, some differences are also there. But correlation is often essential. In general, knowledge flows from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Knowledge doesn't flow from the unfamiliar to the unfamiliar. If I introduce one unfamiliar concept, and then I use another unfamiliar concept to explain that.
Right.
Say, what's going on? So there has to be, it's familiar to the unfamiliar. So, but what you're talking about validation, it is true. It is true that somehow, because at least in India, you could say, India was under foreign rule for almost a millennia. So about 2 centuries, the British rule, and before that, there was Islamic invasion. So especially the Islamic invasion was what the British rule was what sort of created to some extent a national inferiority complex among those who were educated in the British way, in the English educational system, and they didn't really learn the tradition. So then what happens is, like, if you see, you are a yoga teacher, many Indians have become interested in yoga because Westerners have become interested in yoga. So yoga comes from India, and Prabhupada also used that strategy. Prabhupada got Western people to come to India, and that's what they took it seriously. So now slowly, I think it is changing.
Sure.
Slowly, people are learning this can stand in its own right, on its own merit. It doesn't have to be validated by other ways of looking at things. So there is a history to it, but we don't. So does Ayurveda need validation from Harvard or something like that? Well, it doesn't. But one of the hospitals over here, we have the Bhakti-yogi hospital, where they have developed a treatment which they found very helpful in dealing with COVID. But there's one hospital, they did their testing, they did it in nearby hospitals. But if this medicine is to be made available to the world, we don't have the resources to do that. The government is not just going to be okay, you did this test, we'll accept it. Immediately, if the Indian government does that, the whole media will say, oh, you are buying into right-wing extremists, and it'll just become like Hindutva bashing narrative. So we need that to be validated in some way by some mainstream medical organizations. Then the government can take it, then it can be propagated. I'm not necessarily saying that this is like a panacea for COVID, but I'm just giving a hypothetical case. Even if Ayurveda developed a cure for COVID, the Ayurvedic doctors today by themselves just don't have the capacity to reach out to the world. So
I mean, that question, it's just like, why would we need Harvard to recognize Ayurveda? Like, even like Lisa Tuttle's writing here on the chat board, just practical questions like, will my insurance cover my Ayurvedic treatment? Well, unless it's seen as something that's valid and it's recognized by some form of authority, then it may not be. Okay, that's a squirrel.
Okay, that was a bear. I admit it, that was a bear. It was a good bear. It was a beautiful bear. It was a charming bear, a dancing bear, if not. But
okay, I guess in summary, there's been histories of invasions and conquerings and so on, and so what's prominent at one point isn't necessarily going to be prominent and accepted, as history moves on. But let me just quickly, and Prabhu, I think we're going to need to bring you back to look at this chapter because we still haven't gotten to this chapter. Maybe on Monday we could bring you back. Would you be available then?
Yes, well, yeah.
Okay, very good, very good. So then let's right now, for people that are saying that they're a little confused, let me just try to really briefly break it down again. Is that here in this ancient text, we're reading a conversation where something called Sankhya is described. Sankhya literally means to count. It's a way of breaking down the material world into 24 elements, and these elements are a little bit different than what you see in the periodic table. It's elements like our senses, that when we commonly speak of our senses, the ability to see, the ability to smell, to touch, etc., as well as the objects of the senses, that which is, the very sense of touch and so on, as well as other senses like the voice to be able to speak, the legs to be able to move, the hands to be able to grip, etc. Then it also includes 3 different departments of our cognitive faculty, of our, which they call the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And so on. So it breaks down. It's a system of looking at the world by breaking it down into 24 elements. And then what Chaitanya Charan shared with, it's very profound. There's a lot to it. This is just a very general description. But what Chaitanya Charan was saying was that these different spiritual traditions have employed this worldview, this analysis. Buddhism employed it in what he called the 24 Sankhya, meaning there's only these 24 elements and nothing else. The self it reaches its spiritual perfection through which you could call the 25th element, the self, right? The soul, which is spiritual, which is beyond it. He's saying that that at least some Buddhists see the perfection, which they'll call nirvana, as this when the self dissolves and there's only the 24 elements left, or let's say there's nothing left in one sense. And then he went on to describe how the Advaitins, the Monists, certain, you could say Hindu philosophers or Vedantins, approach Sankhya. It's a 25 Sankhya where there's those 24 elements, plus, I guess they would say Brahman, right? That plus there's or purusha, there's consciousness beyond that. And when we realize that there's no difference between you and I, that we are the same element, and actually there's no distinction between us, we just merge into that flow of consciousness, or that blissful flow of consciousness, and that's the perfection. And then what Kapiladeva is presenting here could be called 26 Sankhya, which means there's the 24 elements, there's 2 purushas, there's 2 conscious beings, 2 categories of conscious being. Us, the soul, and then God. And so altogether that makes 26 elements. And it's this Sankhya philosophy that is being taught in the Bhagavatam, and the purpose of it being taught is by analyzing the spiritual world and our relationship to it, as well as our relationship to God, we can really understand the mess that we've gotten ourselves into, why we suffer in this world, and the practical way out of it. That summarize it well enough?
I think you're a spiritual scientist, Kaustubha.
No, well, because I'm hearing from the spiritual scientist.
I think that should be part of your subtitle. Kaustubha at the Bhakti Center, also a spiritual scientist.
No, just learning and hearing from the spiritual scientist. So hopefully that will help simplify things for listeners. Does that work for you, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu?
That's very succinctly summarized, Prabhu.
Okay.
With much greater clarity than what I was doing.
No. You were doing great. And so now we still have texts 19 through 71 that we want to get a good summary of, and we're not going to be able to do it in the next 5 minutes. But is there anything else? But let's say we bring you back on Monday, and we get it, and at that time we dive right into these verses, and we get a feel for what's happening there. But before we do that, with the 5 minutes or so that we still have today, is there anything else that would help prepare us for that conversation that you could share?
Okay, yeah, sure. See, this is science in one sense, but this is science. You talk about science, periodic has this periodic table with its elements, and these are different. So why is this different? Because there are many reasons, but one primary reason is science focuses on the study of matter. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Sankhya focuses on our experience of matter. So science, in fact, the experiential properties of matter, they are in science, Earth, what if you talk about various elements, most of us don't even know those elements in the periodic table. Then they divide them into atoms and molecules. So what happened in science, when it started studying itself, matter, right from the time of Galileo and thereafter Francis Bacon was the pioneer of scientific method, science decided to divide nature into primary qualities and secondary qualities. And what were the primary qualities according to science? Said all that were measurable. So length, breadth, height, viscosity, luminosity, all these are measurable qualities. So in science, they are considered primary. And the whole analysis of the world is based on mathematical connection between various measurable properties of matter.
Okay.
But say when we meet people, so if we go to somebody's house, if the house is very big or very small, we may notice the dimensions. If we meet a person, yeah, I met a wonderful person yesterday. Okay, what was wonderful? It was 5 feet and 75 kg. Really? We don't think of that as the first thing. We don't think of the dimensions as the first thing. See, our experience of matter is, oh, this person was so polite, this person was so sweet, this person was so sharp, this person was so insightful, whatever. So we focus on the experience of matter.
There's no way to measure those qualities.
Yeah, measurement may be a part of the experience, but only when it's extraordinary. Say if somebody is 3 feet or somebody is 7.5 feet, then that's the first thing we'll talk about.
Yeah.
If somebody is 40 kg or somebody is 200 kg, then that's the first thing we may talk about it. But otherwise, the measurable is not the first thing we experience. So if you see the whole analysis, why senses, why sense objects? Because these are the means through which we experience matter.
Yeah.
So
I think that's so significant what you just said, because even the term purusha means enjoyer, right? So you have the enjoyer and you analyze what's enjoyed in one sense, or experienced, the experiencer and what is experienced.
Yes. So it's a very different way of looking at the world. And the classification of matter done in Sankhya is from the experiential perspective. In modern philosophy, this is called as phenomenology. Phenomena is how we experience matter. So it's from a phenomenological perspective that this whole analysis is done. And the purpose is to transform our experience.
This is a great point. So let me just make sure that I'm understanding this correctly again. That one way of approaching science is to assume that even our own experience is just a combination of material elements. So basically, you're just analyzing material elements, but the way that and measuring them. And if you can't measure them, then there's really not so much point in studying them. Almost is like the assumption. And whereas this ancient Vedantic approach was to say, no. We're gonna the whole point to this whole study is to improve our experience. There's the material elements which are being experienced, and then there's the purusha, the experiencer. That's us. So it begins with the assumption that both exist and both are separate, and then it proceeds in such a way that we might be able to improve our experience.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
So because science doesn't focus on, say, the experience of matter, they consider cooking. Now, food processing is a huge industry, and it is a lot of science involved in it. But with all our scientific advancement, we cannot make anything like a tastometer. How good does this taste?
Right.
Interesting.
We can measure the calorie value of food. Now, this is fatty, this is not fatty, nutritional value we can measure. But taste is an experience. Taste can't be quantified. So for that, we need conscious experience. So that's one example of a different approach to the study of matter.
I see. Very good.
Beautiful.
Well, I don't know if we have regular takeaways. Normally we have takeaways
We've
today.
got some good takeaways.
Yeah,
Mara, do you have a taste meter over there at your kitchen?
No,
Well, we
I
do
don't.
know
I'm looking for one.
That would be good.
It's measurable. She's #1 in Columbia County. Everybody knows that.
He is #1. We've dipped that taste meter in the Columbia County pool, and it went to #1. Mara's a chef.
She's the #1 vegan chef in Columbia County, New York State.
Likely the only vegan chef in Columbia County also. So.
Well, hey, then it's an easy race.
All right, we do have some takeaways. We have a few takeaways today.
Oh, let's hear the takeaways.
All right. Matter needs divine activation to become attractive.
Nice.
Time is the transformer.
We got
The
great
Ram-
takeaways.
That's a T-shirt right there.
Yeah.
Time is the transformer.
The rom-com is really a horror movie.
Okay.
Time exposes the temporariness of material things.
Yes.
Matter is also eternal. It just transforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mug.
And dancing bears do not care for time.
All right.
No, they don't. Dancing bears do not care for time one iota.
Okay. So we're here with Q&A tomorrow. Sleep in Saturday, although every day's sleep in lately.
Every day is sleeping Saturday on the new Wisdom of the Sages.
Okay. So we're here at 8 a.m. Eastern time with Q&A tomorrow, Saturday. And we'll bring, and Sunday we're still undecided about. We're going to try to bring on a special guest.
Oh, did we I thought we got that guest.
I never said that was confirmed for this Sunday. So we're working on it. Yeah.
We're trying to work on a secret guest.
Okay. But otherwise, we'll be back with Chaitanya Charan, the spiritual scientist, Monday to summarize this chapter 26.
We want to get to the bottom of this.
Got to get to the bottom of it. It's still
What the
escaping
heck
us.
is
But you
science?
prepared us for it. Thank you so much for coming on our show today, Prabhu. We respect you.
We love you, actually. We
To
love
the moon
you.
and back.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to trying to assist you.
And everyone should check him out at spiritualscientist.com. Is that right?
Or is it-
TheSpiritualScientist.com
The spiritual.
Thespiritualscientist.com. Check
And
out
and
his
also
daily
GitaDaily.com.
GitaDaily.com. These are
Great.
excellent spiritual resources.
And check out Kaustubha's new website, thespiritualscientist.net. That's,
Come on.
we got .net. It's on sale for $1.99 a year.
GitaDaily.com and thespiritualscientist.com. You'll get a lot of great resources there.
Yeah,
He's on YouTube.
everywhere.
on
You can
YouTube.
just listen
Chaitanya
to him.
Charan.
We can listen to Chaitanya Charan all day long, and
Learn
valuable
so much.
information,
Yeah.
valuable stuff. Hey, join us tonight for Sweet Baby Krishna at 7:30 if you're a Patreon member, and if you're not a Patreon member, become a Patreon member. It's wonderful. You pay whatever you want a month, whatever you want, and then you enter the chambers of the Patreon mansion, the Patreon temple, and then we have archives of valuable information. And tonight, we are doing a Sweet Baby Krishna marathon for Kartik, doing as much as I can. And we're reading from the Garga Samhita, one of me and Mara's favorite books.
Garga Samhita. Okay. All right.
We're up in the notch a little bit for
Okay.
Kartik. We're raising the bar.